Welcome to Aria, a gripping examination of true stories involving betrayal, deceit, and love. Please take a moment to interact and hit the like button if these videos are making you happy. It has a bigger impact than you might think. Let's examine the story that is told today. I never imagined that my life would take such a complicated turn. When I think back on how it all started, I realize that it wasn't just one decision or one event that changed everything. A series of small things arose, including imperceptible choices, unsaid thoughts, and feelings I suppressed, only to have them surface in unexpected places throughout my life. This may be the way that many people deviate from their course, not by dramatic changes, but rather by gradually drifting away from the core of who they thought they were. I would want to introduce myself. My name is Nora. I'm 38 years old and happily married to Adam, my college sweetheart. 12 of the 14 years of our journey were spent bound by marriage. Our house is located just outside of Columbus, Ohio, in a quiet area. We are fortunate to have two children, Brandon, who recently turned 7, and Zoe, who is 10 years old. To people looking on from the sidelines, we seem to be the epitome of a happy family from every perspective. Adam is an honest man. He has a kind disposition, a strong sense of responsibility, and an unwavering commitment to our family. He's never been one to chase attention. He may not astonish me with expansive romantic gestures or use pretentious language, but he is always there to encourage me. He faithfully takes out the garbage every Thursday morning and makes sure my car is fueled when the tank is low. He never forgets the kids' doctor's appointments or school functions. He is dependable and unwavering, which may be the cause of the problem. We set out on our voyage together full of energy and enthusiasm. We were just two young idealists, imagining a world we did not yet know how to build. We moved into a one-bedroom apartment after college, full of joy as we collected mismatched furniture from yard sales and treasured hand-me-downs. Even though we thought we had everything we could possibly need, we would laugh at the irony of our little belongings. The vocations followed. While I discovered my calling as a middle school English teacher, he started a career in finance. After Zoe arrived, I decided to take a break from teaching and spend some time at home. I found myself thinking back on those early days spent with my kids as the years passed. Even while I had no regrets about being there for them, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that something inside of me had started to wane, like a light that slowly went out without my knowledge. Adam worked hard like he always had, and I understood exactly why. He wanted to give us all that had been missing from his own youth, but the long hours and unforgiving demands started to get to him. I really tried to be sympathetic, but in the years of infant bottles, preschool drop-offs, and late-night shopping errands, I started to feel invisible. Our chats veered away from the harsh realities of life and mostly focused on schedules, costs, and the kids. We moved past the straightforward question, "How was your day? You forgot to remove the chicken from the freezer, did you? Would you kindly come get Zoe at soccer?" I was aware of his absence even though he was seated next to me on the couch. The sensation of being acknowledged and understood was something I yearned for. I never looked for conflict. Even if I didn't find my surroundings boring or look for new experiences, I felt a great sense of loneliness, which is the hardest thing to admit. The weight of loneliness engulfed me. It all started with a friendly summer get-together where a neighborhood book club was born. My friend Claire invited me, saying it would be a great way to meet new people and get out of the house. She was right. I had not engaged in anything for my own pleasure in what felt like forever. Every other Tuesday night, the club met at the local library, and for the first time in years, I felt like Nora again, more than just Adam's wife or mother. Joel was the person I met there. He was in his mid-40s, working in architecture, navigating the challenges of life after a divorce, and no longer had children. He had just joined the group. His capacity to listen was what first caught my attention. He was a very attentive person who looked people in the eyes, leaned in when they spoke, and asked questions that showed real interest. He was not looking for praise from anyone. He had a singular presence, a rarity that pervaded the atmosphere. First, I didn't think it was important. That's all there is to it. I'm married, he's divorced, and we meet through our book club. But as time went on, I started to notice small nuances. He would remember the smallest facts I had mentioned in passing, such as my college days of writing poetry or my son's aversion to thunderstorms. He would ask me about the kids and my involvement in teaching. There was something intriguing about him. I experienced a sense of importance that went beyond the duties I performed for my family. One evening, as the gathering came to an end, we all walked together to our cars. The earthy smell of damp pavement and new grass permeated the air as the raindrops remained. For a while we talked lightly about the book and the weather, and then he said, "You have a very calming aura, Nora. Spending time with someone like that is enjoyable." I'm not sure why, but that line stuck in my head for some reason. It might have been because I hadn't felt any energy coming from me in a long time, let alone one that was calming. In the boundaries of my house, I was always in a hurry, pushing, supervising, and directing the daily calendar. As I laid in bed next to Adam, the soft sound of his sleeping filled the room, but Joel's voice continued to reverberate in my head. Everything inside of me was a tempest of turmoil. It was devoid of romanticism, at least for the time being, but it roused an emotion that had lain dormant within of me. We talked before and after meetings and occasionally exchanged texts as our relationship grew stronger and more genuine in the months that followed. Sometimes we talked about books, and on a few Saturday mornings when the club wasn't meeting, we took advantage of the chance to have coffee together. There were no covert motives or light-hearted humor. Everything was open and honest. I told myself it was harmless enough, but I felt deep down that I was lying to myself because I started dressing up for book club. I noticed that I was looking at my phone more and more, hoping to see a message from him. I wondered what I would say when we spoke again, wondering if he would notice my new earrings or comment on the article I had shared. Is there anything more discouraging? I didn't tell Adam any of this, not because I was bad, or so I told myself, but because I didn't want to explain why I needed someone else to actually see me. It was hard for me to face the fact that my relationship with a man I hardly know felt deeper than the relationship one had developed with the person I had lived with. The pivotal moment came on a cool October evening. The evening had come for the autumn assembly of our book club. Simple pleasures, a variety of ciders, a spread of munchies, and the thoughtful exchange of quotations from works that have influenced our lives are all in store. When Joel's turn came, he read aloud a passage that caught me off guard as we stood in a circle, trading quotes. He made reference to Rainer Maria Rilke's Atoms. Maybe everything terrible is, at its heart, something that longs for our love. It was a beautiful, moving line. After taking in the words, he paused for a bit, looked about, and then looked at me. It was only for a moment, yet in that look something changed. It was subtly done. I sensed it profoundly, yet the world around me was unaware. He stayed till I was alone myself and said that statement later that night as the throng started to thin out. It reminded me how often we hide our wounds instead of allowing them to heal. I struggled to speak, my throat tight. He wasn't talking about me, not directly, but I felt that he could see all that I tried to hide. I came home that evening and waited in my car for 20 minutes before getting in. Adam sat in the living room playing the game, and I stood in the hallway and watched him for a few seconds. I had a hard time remembering the last time we actually talked, when our eyes actually met. I couldn't. Even if there were no physical occurrences, the guilt started to chew at my insides. On an emotional level, however, I was lost. Swift, I realized I had to make a choice at that very instant. Not quite yet, not between Joel and Adam, but the battle between preserving the appearance of normalcy and facing the fact that something was definitely wrong. And that's exactly where the real story started. In the days that followed that fall meeting, I was surrounded by a strange fog. The delicate kind, the kind that slowly seeps in and shrouds everything in a gentle silence rather than a big, stormy affair. I felt as though I was simply going through each chore on autopilot as I went about my daily routine, grocery shopping, helping with homework and packing lunches. Despite the fact that my body took up the space, my mind was far from the present. I have started journaling again. It had been a long time since I had done that. After the kids had fallen asleep and Adam had gone to his dreams, I would sit on the floor of our walk-in closet in the stillness of the night, writing down my thoughts in an old notebook. It's not really about Joel. Rather, it's a reflection of who I was becoming, the changes I was going through, and the strange pain that had been a part of my life for years. As I sat down to write one evening, I wondered when I stopped being a dreamer and became only a steward of the ordinary. I couldn't get that statement out of my head for what seemed like forever. Adam was not the only one who was at fault. He never asked me to give up anything, and everything happened so subtly. I had imagined taking a short break from teaching after Zoe was born, only a year before I returned. However, that first year dragged on into 3, and it became evident that my space had changed and no longer fit the same way after Brandon moved in. My license expired, the school's curriculum changed, and I fell out of favor with most of my previous coworkers. I was standing on the edge of my own life, watching from a distance before I ever realized it. Adam had periodically reached out, offering that we discuss if I could go back to work or take some classes, but the time never seemed to fit with my personal sense of preparation. I eventually stopped talking about it too, not because I didn't care, but because it felt easier than facing the extent of my own confusion. And suddenly here was Joel, a mirror of what I thought had vanished from my life. I kept telling myself that I had not crossed any limits though. Still, the cue moved forward. It had been a week since that fateful night at the library when Joel had contacted me. Just a quick note. I've been thinking about what you said about the art of writing. I think you should go for it, even if it's just for yourself. Nora, there's a message that needs to be communicated. I read it 4 times before I wrote my response, which was polite and succinct. Thank you, I said, and decided to stop there. But there was more than just the compliment that stuck in my head. He had listened, remembered, and followed up to demonstrate his real concern. It was only a brief gesture of goodwill, but in the silence of my life, it hung heavy. I started writing short stories as a hobby. I kept them to myself, just brief glimpses, ephemeral moments, and dispersed fragments. Once again, though, there was a certain delight in the process of creation. I kept it for Adam even though it felt like I was recovering a part of myself that had gone away without my knowledge. That's what's bothering me right now. The fact that I couldn't share this newfound happiness with my husband was what bothered me, not the fact that I had found joy elsewhere. An imperceptible barrier prevented me from sharing my comeback to writing whenever the idea occurred to me. I was afraid he would ignore it or not understand its real meaning. I wanted someone to share that experience with me, but I didn't want polite support. Joel stood alone in his comprehension at that precise time. Early in November, something happened that changed everything, and I ran into Joel by chance at the neighborhood coffee shop. I went out early one Saturday morning to get muffins for the kids and to get a little alone time. He was sitting at a lonely corner table reading, and when he looked up at me, a smile appeared on his face. Nora, he replied as he stood up. This is a very pleasant surprise. My heart faltered for an instant, and I felt a surge of annoyance that was focused just on myself. Oh, just picking up breakfast for the team, I said, smiling back. He asked her to sit for a bit, and I hesitated for a little second. Of course, I said, putting my bag down and taking a seat across from him. We probably spoke for 15 minutes, discussing literature, writing techniques, and amusing thoughts. However, there was an unsaid bond, a subtle comprehension, a quiet vitality. He didn't touch me, he didn't say anything offensive, but I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, and I was positive he could too. I was about to go when he looked at me and said, I really like our chats, Nora. Your existence is a reminder that there are still decent and considerate people in the world. I nodded, struggling to find the appropriate words to answer as the weight of quiet descended between us. My fingers gripped the steering wheel with an almost overwhelming clenching as I drove home. I was wondering, but nothing came of it. But I knew very well that something had changed inside of me, not physically, but emotionally. I had gone too far, maybe not with Joel, but definitely with myself. As the night grew darker and the kids fell asleep, I turned to Adam and said I wanted to talk. He seemed surprised. Apparently, we don't have those kinds of conversations anymore, but he put down the remote control and turned to face me. He said, "Hello there." I paused, wondering where to start as a flood of doubt swept over me. I've had the feeling that something is off for a while now. There was worry in his face. Could you elaborate on your meaning? I can't quite put my finger on it, but it feels like I've lost something along the way. Possibly a piece of who I am, or the idea of who I would be by now. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "I'm sorry you feel that way." I waited, waiting for him to ask me a question, to ask me what I needed, to admit that he felt it too. But he just turned back to the TV and replied, "You know I love you, don't you?" I said, "I understand." And I did what I was told. The main issue, though, was not that. In the days that followed, I tried to keep Joel at a distance and postponed answering his messages. I decided not to attend the next book club meeting. I told myself that I needed time alone to think. Yes, it was, but the pain persisted, unrelenting. I knew that my affections for Joel were not romantic. His ability to make me feel like a whole person again, someone worthy of consideration and comprehension, was what enthralled me. I tried to ignore it, but the fact became clear. Something had to change. I made up my mind one afternoon as I sat on the porch watching the last of the leaves fall from the trees. I had to talk to Joel, not to prolong whatever it was that had come to this, but to face the reality for both of us, to acknowledge it and then let it go. I contacted him, asking if we might meet for a walk, a public area, accessible to everyone. At the park next to the library, our paths met. There was a distinct taste of early winter in the chilly air. With his hands in his coat pockets, he smiled subtly as he greeted me. He said quietly, I was starting to wonder if I had made a mistake. "No, you didn't," I answered, shaking my head. I just needed a time to think. The leaves were crackling beneath our feet as we started our leisurely walk. "I must finally speak up," I murmured, unsure of how you might react. He bowed his head, awaiting the moment. "We have had genuinely important chats. I value your well-being as a friend, and I value how you've motivated me to find who I am. But I am married, and I've realized that if I keep interacting with you the way I have, I run the risk of going too far and there won't be a way back. It's possible that I've emotionally hit that threshold and am unable to move on, neither toward my family nor toward myself." For what seemed like a lifetime, he stopped in his tracks and stared at me. "I know," he said. "I never wanted to be the source of your inner turmoil." "No," I said, "you're not." He nodded again, slowly, purposefully. "This responsibility falls on my shoulders, and for that reason I must take a step back. Nora, you have a very admirable heart. Make sure that stays in your possession." As we said our goodbyes, I headed to the car with tears in my eyes, not from heartache, but from the deep understanding that, in spite of the suffering it caused, I was at last making the correct decision. Things at home didn't get better overnight. However, I had a metamorphosis and started to accept a higher level of honesty with Adam and with myself. I began setting little goals, going back to writing regularly, and researching the possibility of renewing my teaching license. Adam offered his support, if with some hesitancy, when I told him that I wanted to look for work again, not just to get money, but also to give myself a feeling of purpose again. He apparently sensed that something had happened, but he decided not to ask. I held back from disclosing the details. Maybe I may in the future, but not just yet. This signaled the start of a new adventure, one that was uncomfortable and chaotic, but unquestionably necessary for my own growth. I was on the verge of making a choice that would cause me to regret it, but I chose to awaken, and that one decision changed everything. Almost a year has gone by since that chapter of my life ended gently, but its echoes are still there, softly resonating like a song I once loved very much. I didn't tell Adam anything, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because the real story was bigger than Joel. It focused on my trip and my awakening to a life that I had slowly let sag into the tedium of routine and duty. Instead of a new romance, I wanted a reminder that I could still feel the vitality of life in the life I had already accepted. There are problems with our union. It was never supposed to be, but we've started having more in-depth discussions, really getting down to the small details, the difficult subjects, and the goals we used to put off for a far-off future. Adam is trying, and I'm trying too. Even though the journey is frequently difficult, something is changing, truth is being embraced, and a small but significant healing is happening. I have gone back to teaching part-time, and being back into the classroom reminded me of who I used to be and what I still am when I let myself be seen. When I get home, I experience a strangely wonderful sensation of exhaustion, a sense of achievement, of having overcome obstacles, of being necessary. It's been a while since Joel and I spoke, ever since that fateful day in the park, and I stand by my decision to know him. He unexpectedly brought me back to who I really was, not because he made a romantic gesture, but rather because he saw a side of me that I had long ignored. And now, as I look into the mirror, the woman I used to be is back in front of me. Not exactly the same. Yes, older, a little ragged around the edges, but real,